The year is 1996. Although I wouldn't know it until much later, this was the first time I ever watched a clip from Back to the Future. It took me a while to piece it together. I remember seeing a guy in a car on a railway track, a train coming towards him, the guy says shit and runs from the car. That's all I remember. And here we are, over 20 years later, and we're looking at my number one favourite movie of all time, Back to the Future Part 3, the final part of this epic trilogy. I'm going to say this right now. I think Back to the Future Part 3 has the best destination, the best music, the best climax, and the most touching moments in the entire trilogy. And now, it's time to end this retrospective on a high note. I mentioned previously that I watched Part 3 before Part 2, purely because of the description on the back of the box. Needless to say, I was confused as all hell. Not only when Marty returned after the lightning bolt strike, but also when Doc Brown first appears in 1885. There's a Dr. Emmett Brown in 1885. When the fuck did that happen? My brain hurts. So let's start at the beginning. Coming soon to video and DVD. Please don't be E.T. 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 It's fucking E.T. My god, 3 videos and all the same promos. You know, honestly, I'm willing to bet that anti-piracy warning is also at the end. Spoiler alert, it is. Oh, forget this. Featuring the greatest movie opening music of all time, Back to the Future Part 3 begins where Part 2 left off. The lightning is about to strike the clock tower, Marty is racing towards the wire, Doc Brown connects the cables, the car hits the wire and disappears into the future. Doc begins to celebrate the successful experiment. But then along comes Marty McFly racing towards him.
Doc! 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 Okay, relax, Doc. It's me, it's Marty.
No, it can't be. Just sent you back to the future.
Yeah. Oh, I know he did send me back to the future, but I'm back. I'm back from the future.
You know, I'm beginning to think he actually didn't take it that well. Doc wakes up the next day and recounts the night's events. Marty presents the letter, and Doc learns of him landing in 1885 after a freak burst of lightning. The duo learn that the older scientist has made 1885 his home, has taken a job as a blacksmith, and has buried the damaged DeLorean in an abandoned mine next to the local cemetery, with the intention of it being recovered and repaired in 1955, allowing Marty to return to the future.
We may have to blast.
Wow, respect for the dead right there. The two men search the mine and recover the DeLorean. It seems like all is going to plan. Until Copernicus the dog finds a tombstone belonging to someone called Emmett Brown. Oh boy. Erected in eternal memory by his beloved Clara. Who the hell is Clara?
Shot in the back by Buford Tannen over a matter of $80. What kind of a future do you call that?
The next day, they investigate the library records and learn about Buford Tannen and the McFly family. And eventually, they find a photo of Doc Brown, proving that it is indeed him who dies 1 week after he writes a letter to Marty. For Marty, there's only one solution to this dilemma.
After you fix the time circuits and put new tires on the DeLorean, I'm going back to 1885 and I'm bringing you home.
Doc repairs the car and prepares for Marty's departure from 1955. I'd also like to take note that it took 3 movies and 5 years just to get past November 12th. Marty takes off and lands in 1885 in the middle of a chase between a group of Native Americans and the US cavalry. The teenager takes shelter in a nearby bear cave and prepares to trek into Hill Valley when he discovers an Indian's arrow wedged into the car.
Damn, I ripped the fuel line.
Oh no. Marty eventually has to flee the car when he discovers the inhabitant of the bear cave. He races over the hill and collapses into a fence. Hours later, he wakes up and learns he is residing at the McFly farm, of all places. He meets his great-great-grandfather Seamus and his son William, the first McFly born in America. He pisses on Marty, just thought I'd say. Seamus offers to help him find his blacksmith friend, taking him as far as the railroad tracks that lead into Hill Valley, even offering to give him a new hat. The next day, Marty ventures alone into Hill Valley and finds his way into the Palace Saloon, where he meets Buford Mad Dog Tannen. He hates that name. Nobody calls him Mad Dog, especially not some duded up egg-sucking gutter trash like Clint Eastwood. Because that's his name here. This leads to a rather familiar chase across town, which leads to Marty being hanged at the brand new courthouse. It looks like the end for Mr. McFly until along comes the blacksmith.
You'll shoot the fleas off a dog's back at 500 yards, Tannen, and it's pointed straight in your head!
During this confrontation, Marty learns about the $80 owed to Mad Dog. After he flees, Doc confronts Marty about returning to 1885 rather than returning to 1985. Of course, the hostilities don't last long. Doc soon learns about his upcoming death as well as the arrival of a new schoolteacher named Clara Clayton, whom he promised to pick up, and decides to leave the Old West and return to the 20th century. There's just one problem. The DeLorean has a punctured gas tank, and without gasoline they have no hope of getting the car up to 88 mph. Marty and Doc retrieve the car and attempt to refuel it with the best alternative, really strong alcohol. It seems to work until...
Give more gas! Blew the fuel injection manifold. Strong stuff, all right.
Well, now the car is officially fucked. They can't pull the car, and it won't run on its own power with substitute fuel. But what if they can figure out a way to push it up to 88 miles per hour? That gives the duo the idea to use the local steam train to push the DeLorean up to 88. The next train is due to arrive on Monday morning. Plenty of time to work out a plan. Use the spur that runs off the main line to get up enough speed to reach 88, 3 miles out towards the bridge over Clayton Ravine. Well, sort of, the bridge won't be finished for another 9 months, but there should be enough distance to work with. Just as the men check out the ravine, they hear the call of a woman in danger, as our horses and cart are darting towards the ravine. Marty and Doc race to the rescue, with Doc catching her before her wagon full of luggage goes over into the ravine. They discover that the endangered woman is actually Clara Clayton, and Cupid fires his magic arrow. Love at first sight for Dr. Emmett Brown. Doc may have his eyes up for someone, but the plan still goes ahead. They plan ahead for Monday the 7th. On the night of September 5th, Marty and Doc attend the local town festival and get photographed next to the new courthouse clock. Wait a minute, this seems familiar. As Marty conversates with Seamus and Maggie McFly, Doc has a dance with another familiar face. You know, I'm beginning to think those two actually like each other. It all goes fine until Buford Tannen arrives and attempts to shoot the doctor in the back. It's a derringer he's using. Small but effective. Last time he used it, fella took 2 whole days to die. Bled to death inside. It was real painful. Which means Doc would be dead by about supper time on Monday. Oh boy. With the use of a frisbee, Marty comes to the rescue and blows Buford's one and only shot, which leads to him being challenged to a gunfight on Monday morning. Because Marty just cannot handle being called a coward. The next day, Marty learns that Doc spent a lovely night with Clara. Not good. We're going back to the future tomorrow. We cannot be hanging around with women. They also learn that Marty may have changed the future and endangered his own existence by agreeing to Buford's gunfight. Also not good.
Marty, you can't go losing your judgment every time someone calls you a name. That's exactly what causes you to get into that accident in the future.
What? What about my future?
That night, as they make final adjustments to the DeLorean for the journey home, Doc finally comes to the realization that he is well and truly in love with Clara, and is actually willing to remain in 1885 to be with her. After a heated debate with Marty, Doc has a choice to make. Remain in 1885 with the love of his life, or preserve the space-time continuum while he still can. He decides to opt for the latter, even going as far as to tell Clara the truth about where he's from, and it doesn't go well. Depressed, the Doctor proceeds to the saloon and does what every broken-hearted man does. Get shit-faced. Well, sorta. He kinda just holds it. On the morning of September 7th, Marty wakes up near the DeLorean. The Doc isn't there. He races to the saloon, and there he is. Still at the bar, still holding his first drink. He hasn't had a drink yet. He just likes to hold it. Marty convinces him to come back to the future with him, leading Doc to gulp down his whiskey and make for the DeLorean, and... Oh, for fuck's sake, they're on a tight schedule here! As Clara prepares to depart Hill Valley for San Francisco, and Doc Brown is fed a rather dodgy hangover cure, Buford shows up for the duel. As Marty's had some wise words with Doc and the only McFly with a backbone, he has decided to forfeit the duel.
What's that mean?
It means that you win without a fight.
Without shooting? You can't do that! Hey, you can't do that!
When Doc regains consciousness with one raging headache, they race for the back door, only to be discovered by some of Mad Dog's goons. Now Marty has a problem. If he doesn't face Buford Tannen, his good friend dies. On the train, Clara learns that her white-haired man is still deeply in love with her. She stops the train and races back to Hill Valley as Marty decides to take part in the gunfight to spare Doc's life. He offers to settle it like men, but the dude thought wrong. Well, thank God Buford didn't shoot him in the head. As the drilling dimwit approaches his victim, Marty stands up, revealing he was wearing a stove door as a bulletproof vest, and proceeds to beat the living daylights out of Buford Tannen until, in true Back to the Future style, he lands on a cart full of horse poo. As Buford is arrested for robbery, Marty and Doc race to intercept the train, just as Clara returns to town and discovers the time machine. Marty and Doc catch up with the train and borrow the locomotive, which they proceed to drive to the site of the DeLorean. Clara is determined not to lose the love of her life and races after the train as it departs with the DeLorean. She manages to catch up with the train just as Doc prepares to depart the cab and board the DeLorean, eventually alerting the Doctor to her presence. Doc realizes they'll have to take her back and proceeds to guide her towards the front of the train. They're within arm's reach when the Doctor's experimental fuel source causes the engine's boiler to explode. Both Clara and Doc find themselves hanging dangerously from the train until Marty sacrifices his hoverboard, allowing Doc safe passage to rescue Clara. As they approach the ravine, Doc is able to free Clara and Marty is left to return to the future alone. 100 years later, Marty lands in 1985 and rides along the rails to the amazement of Hill Valley locals, until the DeLorean grinds to a halt in front of a diesel locomotive. Marty throws open the door and escapes just before the train rams into and destroys the DeLorean beyond repair. I'd like to comment on the lack of concern with those citizens at the level crossing. They see a tricked out DeLorean riding slowly along a railroad track with a man dressed as a cowboy inside. Less than 2 minutes later, they hear an explosion and they see a freight train heading along the same line, going in the opposite direction. Not a single person races towards the cowboy to see if he's alright after narrowly escaping death. They'll crowd around when someone gets covered in horse shit or gets punched in the jaw, but nothing when something ultra serious happens. Nice people in Hill Valley. Marty runs home and discovers his family are all back to normal, as is Biff. But that's enough of them. He speeds to Jennifer's house and sure enough, she's right where they left her, sound asleep on the porch. The two of them head off towards Hilldale, where Jennifer describes a terrible nightmare involving them in the future. She's convinced it's all a dream until she witnesses an asshole named Needles challenge Marty to a truck race. Uh-oh. Of course, Marty is smart enough at this point and backs out of the race at the last second.
Did you do that on purpose?
Hey, you think I'm stupid enough to race that asshole?
Wait a minute, that means that dream wasn't a dream. Marty takes her to the wreckage of the DeLorean, mourning the fact that his friend will never come back to the future. Until all of a sudden, a souped up steam train appears out of nowhere, piloted by none other than Dr. Emmett Brown. The crazy old scientist actually built another time machine, so much for endangering the space-time continuum. The old man introduces his new family, his wife Clara and his offspring Jules and Vern, and even Einstein. He actually went back for him. So touching. Doc presents Marty with a gift of the photo of the two of them at the clock in 1885 and shares some final wise words with him.
Your future is whatever you make it, so make it a good one. Both of you!
And with that, Doc Brown lifts the train into the air and departs his friends for times and places unknown. And that's Back to the Future 3. As stated numerous times, this is my favourite movie in the trilogy and my favourite movie of all time. I've loved Back to the Future for over 15 years now, and I always come back to the trilogy at least twice a year. Sure, Part 2 may have the worst plot, but I care not a jolt when I revisit the trilogy. Every time I watch all three movies, I have the absolute time of my life, and it always ends on a high note when I come to Part 3. As stated in Part 2, I watched the movies on Back to the Future Day, and I had the time of my life. And when Part 3 was run at the end of the night, that was certainly no exception. Not only did I learn that I knew the movie quotes way too well, but it was simply the greatest movie experience of all time. To see Marty and Doc race across the desert, dragging the car, to see the repeated lightning bolt strikes in Hill Valley, to see Doc Brown, my favourite character in the series, fall in love under the stars, and most definitely to see the train pushing the DeLorean towards the ravine, which is still the greatest climax to any movie I have ever seen in my entire life. I love the movie series to death, I cannot say it enough, and I cannot praise it enough. Granted, there are a number of movies I'd pick over 1 and 2, but as a whole, the trilogy is the greatest pack of movies I have ever seen. The Toy Story and Fast and Furious franchises do a lot of things right for me, but in my heart, they will never beat Back to the Future. And thus ends this long retrospective. When I began Video Memories with these two videos, I knew deep down I'd have to cover this trilogy at some point. These movies were my livelihood, and I had many stories relating to them. I had even made several videos for YouTube regarding them. It was inevitable in the end. And now, it's over. Christmas is approaching, and I say we end this year on a childhood high note.